I can talk to the nearly dead in my dreams. A Creepy Conceptions original. Artwork by Kanarushi. Part 1. I can talk to the nearly dead in my dreams, and last night, my long-lost mother visited me. I guess I should begin by telling you all how I know I can do this, and how I know that it's real. It started when I was 7 years old, sitting in the family room of the ICU at the hospital where my grandmother eventually passed away. Children under 16 were not allowed in the actual room, but since I didn't have a babysitter, my aunt and uncle took turns watching me while they rotated in and out of their mother's room. It was late one Friday. The TV offered a dim glow to the otherwise empty lounge-type area, and I found myself drifting off on my aunt's lap as she tried to hide her sniffles, absent-mindedly stroking my hair. I heard the faint, rhythmic beeps of hospital machinery, but as I fell further into slumber, they seemed to be getting louder. Then, sleep took me. I found myself walking a path in a large garden that I didn't recognize. Without looking, I could tell that there was a house behind me. I came up to a circular center that housed a three-tiered bird bath that was a metallic, dirty blue. In the far right corner was a greenhouse, and the path to my left led to a rectangular pergola decorated with climbing plants and surrounded by flowering bushes. My legs automatically carried me left, and I saw my grandmother sitting on a hanging bench, reading a book. She wore a plaid yellow dress that stopped just below her knees. A thick black belt accentuated her waist and matched the buttons and the black trim on the short sleeves. The collar appeared neatly pressed, and she had on a pair of laced ankle-high brown leather boots. She looked up to me as I approached. Upon recognizing me, however, her calm demeanor did a complete 180. She was in front of me in the blink of an eye, startling me, fingers digging into my shoulders as she knelt down, her features contorted into a look of urgent horror. I can still see it clearly in my mind. I'm always reminded of this moment whenever I'm watching a thrilling scene in a movie where a character is banging on a door to be let in and away from an evil lurking outside. The entire dream seemed masterfully etched into the fabric of my memories, from the smell of the gardenias to the warmth of the summer sun on my skin, and to the fear that grew as my grandmother's grip continued to tighten.
"Finally," she said. "Maddie, dear, I need you to take a message to your aunt and uncle, especially to your aunt."
I stayed quiet in my shock, confused at the situation.
Will you? Will you take my message to them?"
she demanded. I nodded, not used to this nearly hostile level of assertion from my normally gentle grandmother.
"Tell them to stop. Tell them to let it go, to sign the paper, especially your aunt. She's my power of attorney. Tell her that the damn cat's name is Cookie."
She glanced behind her. I wasn't sure exactly what she was saying, but I had never seen her in such a frenzied state. She reminded me of the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland.
"Okay, what are you going to tell her? Can you repeat it to me?"
Stop, let go, and sign the paper, and the cat's name is Cookie."
I was surprised at the monotony in my own voice, considering the cold fear that swirled inside my chest. Grandma looked behind her again, and the beeping from before suddenly returned, becoming as loud as if it were right next to us. When she looked back to me, pure terror still evident on her face, I woke up. My aunt had nudged me so that she could stand and head into my grandmother's room. My uncle stood at the door to the family room, ready to pick me up and carry me down to his waiting car to take me home. But the memories of the dream slammed into me like a tidal wave, and I grabbed my aunt's hand with the same desperation I had felt from my grandmother less than 1 minute before.
"Stop!"
I screamed, frightening my aunt.
"She said stop!"
My aunt looked down at me, eyes wide, her mind struggling to play catch up. I started to cry for reasons I still don't understand, and I was filled with unexplainable emotions that I now know were not my own. My aunt kneeled down in front of me, holding my hand in hers. "What's the matter, sweetie?" she asked gently. "Did you have a bad dream?" I shook my head.
Grandma says she wants you to stop. She says to sign the paper since you're her lawyer. She says the cat's name is Cookie.
My aunt's face went blank. I continued to cry as my uncle walked over and joined us, asking me to clarify what I had said.
I saw Grandma in the garden. She said you have to stop and sign the paper. Especially you, Auntie. She said you're the powerful attorney.
You mean power of attorney?
Asked my uncle.
Yes.
I confirmed.
She also talked about a cat named Cookie.
My aunt said nothing. Walking up and out of the room robotically, my uncle took me in his arms and carried me to the car. I fell asleep before we made it home, and the next time I saw Grandma was at her viewing the following week. I learned later that Grandma had congestive heart failure, which sometimes filled her lungs with water. She caught pneumonia one day and her lungs just couldn't take it. She wound up in the hospital with a breathing tube on life support. The doctors had spoken with my aunt and uncle, telling them that her prognosis was poor and asked if they wanted to terminate care. My aunt, the power of attorney and therefore her healthcare proxy in this situation, would have to sign the paper for the tube to be removed. She and my uncle struggled with the decision since the week prior, my grandma had been relatively independent, living alone in a seniors assisted living community, her condition well managed by her medications. But even though she was on life support, Grandma was conscious a majority of the time. She could hear almost everything, and she could feel almost everything. I didn't see her, but I was told that she sometimes moved her hands and arms. They were considering a tracheostomy, which is where they surgically implant the breathing tube in the neck, and a feeding tube that would go directly into a hole in her small intestine instead of her nose. That's when she came to me in the dream. Apparently, there was no cat named Cookie. You know when you make a new password and the website asks you to pick a security question like, what was the name of your first pet and what was your high school mascot? My grandparents had a similar system with their children, apparently. It came in handy once when a man that my uncle had seen with Grandpa a couple of times tried to offer him a ride home from school. My uncle asked what the cat's name was, and when the man said he didn't know, my uncle ran to the closest house and asked to call his parents. The man left and never came back. I had no idea about the cat. My uncle was allergic to pet dander, and the only pet he had growing up was a small cactus named Steve that sat on his desk. I can't do it on command. I can't just go fall asleep next to someone who is in a coma or otherwise at death's door and have them pop into my dreams. They have to come to me. I don't have to be anywhere near them or even know them. Thankfully, it's nothing like the movie Sixth Sense, where the poor kid sees ghosts everywhere he goes. No, my visits are few and far between, and they seem to require a great deal of effort. The person, or the soul, or whatever you want to call it, requires a certain degree of desperation to give it enough power to manifest itself into my subconscious. I'm also not sure whether my grandmother somehow opened a door that she forgot to close, or if it was always open and she just happened to be the first person to come through. I guess it doesn't matter. In the 2 years that followed my grandmother's passing, I had the luxury of believing that her visit was an isolated incident sparked by our kinship, and that as a child, I happened to be the most receptive to her message. Life eventually found a new normal. I was now living with my aunt, and I spent my days listening to pop music, going to dance class, and powering through all the Percy Jackson books after seeing the first movie and quickly becoming obsessed. The end of the 5th grade was near. I made the AB honor roll. My dad was going to fly in for the graduation ceremony, and I was finally starting to break out of my awkwardness and make new friends. And then it happened again. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this creepy conception of mine. Please remember to like if you like, comment, share, and subscribe. I would love to know what my listeners are thinking. If you would like to submit a prompt request, you can email me at stories@creepyconceptions.com. I do create my own background music, which is free to use as long as you give me credit. If you would like to commission amazing artwork from the brilliant Kanarushi, you can email her at commissions@kanarushistudios.com. Thank you once again for joining us, and as always, stay creepy, my lovelies.